Alright, back with another Destiny 2 video. I want to expand on something that came up in the TWAB yesterday. Generally speaking, it was a pretty good TWAB with some good changes, like the ability to easily change masterworked armor, both legendary and exotic. This is not masterworked, but now I will probably masterwork it because I know how flexible it is. You can just change it for 20k glimmer for exotics, and then 10k glimmer for legendaries, meaning it's a lot easier to build craft since you can just kind of switch around. I was going to say switch and swap. I combined them into to one word. And that only costs, 10k glimmer at a time, so you don't necessarily need like 3 copies of this. Well, actually 4 copies of this now with stasis. So that's a good change. Also a good change is the artifact thing where you can now unlock all of these as time goes on. It will take about the same time to get to 12 out of 12, but this will provide some sort of value for post 100 rank XP leveling, and you will be able to unlock all of these without necessarily having to just reset your artifact. I think they're not changing the cost of this, but if you just get enough XP, you won't need to reset your artifact because you'll have so many things you can unlock. Very good change. Less good change. So far, it is what they were talking about with the orb thing. In terms of what we know so far, there have been hints that it might not be as bad as it sounds, but I kind of wanted to go through that in a little more detail here. So I'm just going to read the orb section here. I apologize. I am on my phone, and people are texting as I'm trying to read this, so if you hear buzzing, that's what it is. Closing out, we are also making a change to the way Guardians create orbs of power with weapons. Elements of the new weapon crafting system will encourage you to use many different weapons and ask you to burn hard-earned masterwork materials on a weapon that you may only be using for a few hours just to generate orbs. That seemed like a tall order. Okay, so I think I figured out what this means, and so what I'm gathering here is that one component of the, quote, combat-based crafting is going to be some sort of objective that's like, create X amount of orbs with an auto rifle, or create X amount of orbs with a fusion rifle. And what they're saying here is they don't want you to have to burn masterwork materials just to get that done. Like, I guess there are people who don't have a single masterworked category of a certain weapon, maybe, but that seems like a weird explanation to me, but I think that's what it means. All right, back to reading. This, combined with our desire to act on consistent player feedback that players want to be able to generate orbs of power with exotic weapons that do not yet have catalysts, led us to the implementation we'll be using in the Witch Queen and beyond. Orb generation on weapon multi-kills will no longer be a function of the weapon's masterwork status, but will instead be provided by a suite of armor mods which are unlocked automatically for all players and which plug into the helmet armor mod socket. Each such mod will apply the orb generation effect to all weapons you have equipped of a particular damage type, so a single mod will cover multiple weapons in your arsenal if they share a damage type. This also applies to a weapon that changes damage types like hard light or kinetic weapon with osmosis. We will continue to create exciting exotic catalysts over the next few seasons, but in the meantime, you will be able to generate orbs with Cloudstrike, Thorn, Thunderlord, Terraba, and any other weapon in the game. Okay, so this isn't great for a few reasons here. The main thing here is changing the idea of orb generation from a masterworked weapon to a helmet mod has a lot of implications. So right away, you're going to have to assume that it's going to be in this slot. This is just for stats. This is for special, build mods like Wells and Charge with Light and Warmind cells and things like that. Whereas this is the kind of general slot for all of the helmet mods, which are Finder mods, like a couple special mods like this, and then targeting mods. So you are either sacrificing targeting or more likely Finder mods in order to generate orbs. And, oops, what did I have on? This build isn't actually finalized. The other problem with that is that since there are only 2 slots, you can only be generating orbs for 2 different types of elemental weapons at a time. The language there was kind of weird. They sort of made it seem like maybe kinetic weapons couldn't generate orbs anymore, unless they're considering... I would assume that they would have to have a kinetic orb generation mod, but then you need 5 mods. You need kinetic, you need arc, you need solar, you need void, and you need stasis. And Lord knows that those are going to be connected to elemental affinity on armor, which would make this even more complicated. So at any given time, you could only have orb generation on 2 out of 3 potential slots, or 5 potential things total. So every time you switch a weapon, you would also have to switch your helmet mods to accommodate for whatever is going to be generating orbs there. This also means that you cannot have 3 different types of things going and also have them all make orbs at the same time. So in this case, you would need a kinetic orb slot, solar orb slot, and then a stasis orb slot, and one of those would be left out, so you're just not generating orbs with it. It's not mentioned in the thing, but like one thing Bungie has kind of done in the past is it seems like they sort of want to nerf weapon orb generation. They have already nerfed how much super you get from orb generation, but I also would not be super surprised if they were trying to nerf kind of the prevalence of orbs in general. Protective light in particular is something that is ridiculously strong and kind of a must-have for all kinds of builds. Argent Ordnance, Sword One, even Surprise Attack, like a lot of these charged with light things they might think are too strong. So I do wonder if the possible intention of this is an indirect or direct nerf to the concept of orbs more generally. But this is complicated because there's an additional idea here that Bungie is only telling us kind of half the story. So what happened after the TWAB went out is Kujay, some other people were tweeting about, okay, this does sound like it sucks, but what if this has something to do with what Bungie said in the past about weapons having a limit of how many perks they can have. So at one point, I forget the exact phrasing, but they said something about how weapons can only do a certain amount of things, and they can't just add like another perk slot, because at that point, like, you're doing too many things. You have, a sight, you have ammo, you have 2 perks, you have a masterwork, you have a mod, and then you have orb generation. The idea, which was retweeted by Joe Gogorath, I always do that. Joe Blackburn, the Destiny director, and Kevin Gaines, the Sandbox director, was this idea that taking away the ability of masterwork weapons to generate orbs, even though it's not like on here as one of the things, it would open up an ability for some sort of new thing. This ties into, Kevin Yanes retweeted something from a past TWAB about foundries. And it said something about like, how do you differentiate, one void hand cannon from another void hand cannon? And they said something about how they wanted to look into, the concept of foundries and something that they're going to announce in the future. So my theory here is that taking away orb generation is going to be like traded for something that is some sort of new perk on weapons. I kind of doubt it will just be a 3rd perk slot, but combined with that other section, I do wonder if there is going to be some sort of intrinsic value given to weapons from a certain foundry or a certain location. And given that masterworking weapons no longer creates orbs and you're only getting this tiny stat bump now, I wonder if masterworking a weapon will, say, unlock the Amalan intrinsic perk for this weapon. So that would be a motivation to do that. I can't think off the top of my head of like what these kinds of perks would be. There's different styles of weapons and how they fire, kind of with Tex Mechanica has obviously a very kind of signature feel to them with the exotics and the one legendary they have, but something kind of past that. Like Amalan weapons have, X or Y bonus. Suros weapons have a bonus. I could also see that extending to weapons that are not from a certain foundry. I mean, obviously we have a lot of these. So like this, this is some sort of Awoken style weapon, that maybe all Awoken style weapons or things, from the Dreaming City, from an Awoken season, have some sort of intrinsic Awoken Dreaming City based perk. Like that could be one of the things that they have that is not necessarily a foundry. This is Seventh Seraph thing from the Warmind era, and then we have Ikelos weapons. Like maybe there is an Ikelos Rasputin Warmind specific thing. We already kind of have this. I just realized with this we have these intrinsically generate Warmind cells, so that concept could be extended theoretically to other types of weapons. So that is kind of my best guess as to what they're doing here. That said, I don't think that like solves the problem with helmets. Like it would be nice if we got another cool intrinsic perk or something on weapons, and yet it doesn't really solve the problem with orb generation and having just 2 slots to generate orbs for 2 different elemental kinds of weapons. This seems like it will be a lot more restrictive and cumbersome, and you will just not be able to rely on orb generation nearly as much, even if you can now, generate orbs with Thorn or Last Word or whatever, like any La Monarch, anything that can't generate orbs now if you slot in whatever mod. But you can only do it in, for 2 different elements, which means you have to match everything, or else you're just not going to be generating orbs on a weapon. And to do so, again, you're sacrificing Finder mods for PvE probably. So I do wonder if some of this is Bungie trying to nerf things by proxy, maybe trying to nerf Finder mods, because I know they've had some problems with those in the past. They think people are too reliant on Finder mods, and they were trying to encourage use of exotic primaries to make the Finder mods actually more worthwhile, and then nerfing kind of orbs in general, which we've already seen nerfed at least once, and possibly nerfing Charged with Light things that they think are too strong, and they're trying to kind of boost competitors like Elemental Wells instead of having everyone rely on the same couple Charged with Light mods. So that's kind of my theory, but we'll see. It's not great that we have to get the bad news and then wait X amount of weeks for the good news. All we can really do is speculate now and go based on Bungie retweeting certain theories that players are having, which does indicate that they are kind of planning X or Y thing. I think we can pretty safely say that they are adding something to all weapons as a result of this change. And this change may have been made to allow that to happen. That doesn't make it a good change necessarily, and that may still come with a lot of problems, but it does seem to kind of indicate that we're going to enter an era where there is some sort of, new thing you can put on weapons, or something new that goes in, when we're crafting weapons, whatever the intrinsic thing is, maybe you choose your intrinsic perk on a weapon or whatever. That seems to be kind of where we're heading here, which is potentially good news, but again, I don't love kind of the overall concept of the change, and I really am going to need to hear the other half of this to understand whether or not this is kind of a good overall trade, or if it's kind of causing more trouble than it's worth and overcomplicating a system that really was kind of fine in the first place. We just wanted, exotics to have orbs. That's really all we wanted, and now we got into this big mess, but there may be a larger reason for that, and I think we're going to find that out sometime soon, but until then, we're just going to have to rely on cryptic retweets and things like that. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon. Take care.